Hello again. And a fine Friday morning it is here. Why am I talking like an Irishman?
I don't know. Are you worried about your Lucky Charms?
I don't know. Always after me, Lucky Charms.
Yes, indeed. I knew some Irish girls in college that were always after my Lucky Charms.
There is a wonderful, the Austin Powers movies were not exactly giants of cinema.
But they were great writing.
But there's one part, and I think it might be the first Austin Powers movie, where one of Dr. Evil's cohorts is an Irish hitman named like Paddy O'Donnell or something like that. And what he's known for is Dr. Evil's introducing his evil henchman, and he says, he keeps a token from every one of his victims on a chain around his wrist. And he says, many an Interpol agent would like to get their hands on that evidence, I can tell you. And then Patty goes, yeah, they're always after me Lucky Charms. And everybody starts laughing. He goes, what? What are you laughing at? They are. They're always after me Lucky Charms.
Didn't see that one
It's
coming.
a television commercial.
Yeah.
I know, that's just stupid stuff flying out of the ether on you. And that's my specialty. That's, Bill brings the smarts, I bring the stupid stuff flying out of the
I
ether.
got my stupid. Let me tell you, I got plenty of stupid.
So, big night at the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board.
Yes, we have a new superintendent of schools, and just in the nicholas of time, because Warren Drake is going to retire on the 30th to leave him free to go to the spa and get his bouffant redone every single day if he wants.
Warren has beautiful hair.
He has beautiful hair. He really does. He's got preacher hair. He got
preacher hair.
He got TV preacher hair,
I like
man.
that preacher hair.
He got preacher hair.
He's got Kenneth Copeland hair.
Yeah.
She's got Betty Davis eyes. He's got Kenneth Copeland hair.
Yes, indeed. But it was a very long school board meeting, and the new superintendent, her family home for most of her life was here in Baton Rouge.
Well, that's nice.
Her parents both passed away last year. Her name is Leslie Brown, and she had been like third in line for the throne at the sixth largest public school system in the country, the Broward County Public Schools.
Nice.
And she said, this is a homecoming for me, and I can't wait to see you soon.
So she got the bona fides.
Yeah. And the second choice, Dr. Nakia Towns, who was heading a school system in Tennessee. And apparently it was a very, very long debate and a choice between the two of them. And if nothing else, I think we should say thank you to these two educators for hanging in so long in this process.
This seemed like an especially long selection process as opposed to some in the past. So we'll see how she does.
Yeah.
Is she Dr. Brown? Dr. Brown.
No, she is not.
She's not a doctor?
She has a master's degree in education and organizations. She
Bro,
does
you can't
not
say
have a
master
doctorate.
anymore. You can't say that anymore.
I can say master.
No, you can't say master anymore.
What are they going to? How are they going to change all those diplomas if you can't say master anymore?
Exactly. The other business. Now, I think it's interesting, given the current environment, where in the same night, the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board said, okay, all right, okay, Lehigh, the name's going to go. The name's going to go. It just it didn't make enough people happy that Robert E. was removed from it. It just became Lehigh. That name just had to go. And I don't know if that's so much offended by the name as just like we didn't win the last round, we have to win.
Well, I think we have a lot of...
And I'm sorry if I'm being harsh, but that's the way I feel about it. It's like, no. We're going to keep at this until we win.
I am going to quote a lady that I saw on TV, and I have forgotten her name because they only had it up on the screen seconds. But I remember her face, and I remember her wonderful bearing, and I remember what she said. And she was on the periphery of a protest going on, and she said, all these people coming in with all this ridiculousness and asking for ridiculous things, and some of them just here to throw bricks through windows and start fires and to fight and to riot and to ask that, this statue be taken down, that name be changed. she said they are hijacking an important discussion that needs to be had.
Yep.
And they are going to ruin the major point of why people were originally upset, and that is race relations between police departments and black males. And
I couldn't agree with her more.
she had tears in her eyes, and I want to tell you, I have rarely been moved by a television interview soundbite as much as I have by this lady, because I could tell that she saw what was an important opportunity for a very important discussion being hijacked by all this damn foolishness. And as you have said, what changes? What changes if you take down a statue of a Confederate soldier in a little bitty town like Clinton? Nothing changes. You're not fixing anything.
Well, you remember we had attorney Niles Hamer on our show, right? Niles is a very, very smart man. I like him a lot. Niles was representing a guy who was on trial in Clinton and was asking for change of venue because of that statue. And Niles made the argument that when you've got a statue honoring a Confederate hero in front of a courthouse, which is a place of judgment, it speaks to the judgment you're going to get when you go inside if you're a black man. And I couldn't disagree with Niles' position. Because first of all, I'm white. I lack a perspective. The first thing all white people need to understand is that we do lack a perspective. So what we need that perspective communicated to us in a reasonable and intelligent way that we can appreciate. This is going to sound terrible, Bill, but just screaming "no justice, no peace" at me is never going to educate me.
No.
It's never going to bring me around. I'm not saying I'm a hard ass. I'm just saying that doesn't help me to understand you. Help me to understand you. And when people have taken some time to talk in those terms, it's been very beneficial for me personally. But I see where they're coming from. It's a courthouse. It's a place of judgment. Maybe that's an inappropriate place for a Confederate monument.
Now let me ask you this, though. And I'm not trying to trivialize it, but there are two things that I think of. And first of all, I think you make a very good point, as did Mr. Hamer. But it's not like it's the wind bar above the locker room at LSU where they hit the wind bar with their hands before they go out into the field of battle. I don't see prosecutors and judges and jurors going out there and taking a knee in front of that statue going, "Help me to have the courage to do injustice to a black person today." I don't see that.
No.
I think most people who have business in that courthouse on a regular basis walk by it on a regular basis and don't give one rat's butt.
Maybe put a cigarette out on its base.
Exactly. And the second point is those that get selected to a jury or those that get elected to a judgeship that are racist are not going to be changed by the removal of that statue. And in fact, it may encourage them to be more virulent in their racism.
Well, I've said this before. When this whole thing started with two tragic police deaths of black individuals at the hands of police. And Breonna Taylor happened pretty quickly right before George Floyd. George Floyd was so much more egregious because, A, America watched the man die. And they watched him die in a way that I don't think anybody would agree that, oh, you're going to die because somebody's kneeling on your neck.
That was not a proper procedure.
Breonna Taylor couldn't have been more improper either. If you're not familiar with Breonna Taylor, she was minding her own business in her own home and innocent of any wrongdoing when police exercising a no-knock warrant just burst in.
And went to the wrong address.
They went to the wrong address. And they shot the wrong occupant. Which makes me wonder, what did she do that made them shoot her? That still has not been explained.
She probably jumped up.
She probably jumped up off the sofa and went,
"What are you doing in my house?"
Yeah. And so boom, boom, boom. In some ways, in my opinion, the death of Breonna Taylor is much more egregious.
Oh, it is. It's much worse.
This is a law-abiding citizen that was minding her own business. So we got those two incidents, and it's really whipped people up. And right after George Floyd, I think that the sympathy of America, for the most part, was with that cause.
And with having very meaningful and proper and as lengthy as they needed to be discussions about that issue.
And all this other stuff is diluting.
Yeah.
It's diverting us from the main issue, and the main issue is police sometimes die at the black people sometimes die at the hands of police officers, and it's quite often unjust.
Now,
The thing is, what we're not talking about is white people also die unjustly at the hands of police officers.
Yeah.
Mistakes are made, errors in judgment are made.
well, again, I am not going to talk about error in judgment with the George Floyd case. That was just exercising extremely bad judgment in a purposeful way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's something that I agree with, though. This morning, LSU Board of Supervisors is going to vote on whether or not they should rename the main library on the Baton Rouge campus. It is now the Troy H. Middleton Library. Now, General Middleton served in the United States Army. He was also the general who had to get rescued in Belgium by Patton's army. Patton. Now, the other one you hear about at Bastogne was Marty McAuliffe, the one who the German general said, here's an offer to surrender. What's your reply? And his reply was nuts.
Nuts, yeah.
Well, Middleton's group was on the other side, and Patton had told them to go ahead and leave because they were coming that way anyway. He stayed. He had to be rescued by Patton. But the reason they want to rename the library, the proof of why they should, is in a letter.
Middleton opposed integration of the school.
Well, and I read the letter that was in his own hand that no one was forcing him to write. He wrote to the University of Texas chancellor in 1961, and in his letter said that he opposed allowing black students to participate in any intercollegiate athletics, and that it was a problem at LSU that they were getting more black students, but they still confined black students to a given area. The entire letter, by the way, is about 8 paragraphs, and it is absolutely filled with conspicuous and pointed racism by a person who was then the chancellor of LSU. And I'm amazed.
And this was 1970 something?
1961.
1961.
And the reason he wrote the letter was because the University of Texas was considering bringing in their first black student athletes, and he wanted to tell those folks in Texas that he thought they were making a big mistake. And you know what? I'm surprised that this wasn't done 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But apparently, former Chancellor Ransom's family made the letter public just about 2 years ago. But this one, you will never get a minute worth of opposition from me on this one. Take his name off of it. Put somebody else's name on it. That is disgraceful.
It's not a matter of speculation or a matter of a very simple association. It's a matter of we've got a document.
Yeah, in his own hand.
In his own hand that shows you exactly the score. You did mention, I had said this before we started the podcast this morning. I personally, for my part, I don't get outraged with all these calls to change names. Lee Circle is still Lee Circle, even though General Lee is down in New Orleans. It's still Lee Circle. They could change the name. People are going to continue to call it Lee Circle, because that's the way we are with names. How long has the 50-year-old bridge in Baton Rouge across the Mississippi River been called the New Bridge?
Yeah, the New Bridge.
For 50 years.
50 years, yeah.
51 years now.
And it actually has a name.
That's the Horace Wilkinson Bridge?
Yes.
Yeah, the Horace Wilkinson Bridge. But nobody calls it that. It's the New Bridge. We have the New Bridge and we have the Old Bridge.
Some people are finally calling it the I-10 Bridge.
I understand why the Old Bridge is called the Old Bridge, because it's one of 2 Huey P. Long bridges across the Mississippi. Why is that? But that's beside the point. Changing the names does not alter the reality. It doesn't alter the history. This is where I think a lot of people, it's like, well, we can change the name if it'll make you feel better. But don't you understand? nothing's going to change the history. So the lesson here is, can you possibly let your own history or the history of your people or the history of my people go and live in the present and live for the future? I don't understand the living in the past mentality. Living in the past is a victim mentality. For just about any, look, I could go around whining about how my Irish ancestors were mistreated and abused and forced into indentured servitude, which is in some ways, I'm going to say this, get ready, indentured servitude was in some ways worse than slavery, because you were forced to work for this guy for whatever he saw fit to pay you, and maybe you'd clear a dime a week, and with that dime, you had to take care of yourself. Mm-hmm. No one was taking care of you. No one was feeding you, clothing you, housing you. So, in a lot of cases, all of us can go back and find a point at which our ancestors, your ancestors are Italian and Sicilian, right?
That's right.
They've been oppressed.
Oh, yeah.
There's hardly a people on the face of this planet that haven't been oppressed. It's just, it hasn't gone so far into the modern age as it has with people of African descent.
This is very minor in the grand scheme of things. Again, everybody listen to me. This is very minor, but it serves as an example. When I first started my own business and started making money, golf was still a very, very popular thing. And there was a lot of business that was done on the golf course. Mm-hmm. And so I said to a colleague, I would like you to sponsor me as a member of the Baton Rouge Country Club. And he started to squirm. And he got really, really, really funny. And I said, what? He said, well, your last name ends in a vowel. And I said, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, you don't get it. I said, just come on out and say it. He said, no Italians are allowed to join Baton Rouge Country Club. No Italians, no Lebanese. And it was kind of like a scene from, but we don't want the Dutch. I actually started to laugh. And that's why Sherwood Forest Country Club was put into operation. It was formed by a bunch of Lebanese business people like Sam Kader and a bunch of Italian business people. And
we'll have our own country club.
But none of us saw the point to do anything but to laugh at their ridiculous stupidity. I mean, I had better ways to go and lose, $30 in a post-golf gin rummy game, okay? Yeah, but this, and as I said, it's a minor example, but there is prejudice that exists against people of all types. It doesn't make it right, mm-hmm. But I also think you're never going to cure that, because to some people it's just harmless. Now, we know good and damn well that when we take it out on black citizens in this country, it's not harmless. It's nasty, it's crude, it's demeaning, mm-hmm. It's economically oppressive. I understand that. But let's not get diverted from the real issue here, which is that, and not what statue is here, what road sign is here, what sign's in front of a building.
We can change everything that is asked of us to change. And the one thing you can't change is history. Now, I understand what's being attempted here. The attempt is, if you change enough, and then you teach the right stuff, and by the right stuff I mean to achieve the objective. The objective is, you don't necessarily rewrite history, it's just everyone's forgotten it and you're no longer teaching it, so it does fall by the wayside. I've talked to young people that say, I asked them, how much did you learn about the Civil War when you were in school? We had for 2 weeks, mm-hmm. And then we moved on. The American Revolution is a very unpleasant time in our history.
Well, and all those people that form the country now are being vilified because most of them own slaves.
Yeah. And what you can't ask people to accept is, first of all, it was in the past, get over it. Second of all, it was a very different time. And it was a less enlightened time. There were people that were supposedly learned, smart people that argued that a black man was not a full human being, mm-hmm. that a black man was somehow part animal. That can't be any more wrong thinking than that. But this, in some cases, were the fathers of our country.
Well, and was the intent pure evil, or was the intent we just don't know any better? because you know what? We don't see any of these people occurring natively here.
Now, at the time of the American Revolution, there were millions of free black men moving about the planet, and here in the colonies, as it were. But the thing is, do we have to live tainted by and anchored by our past, or do we learn from our past and move on?
I think we have to always remember it and be very, very careful when we examine it. Now, here's something that there are still 2 of Hitler's death camps that are fairly much in their original structure of when they were liberated. There's Auschwitz, and there's I think it's Bergen-Belsen. And a great many of the visitors to those 2 now shrine museums are Jewish people. And when asked why they come here, and they say, so that everyone shares in our remembering of this awful part of our history. Now, for black people in the United States, that should be something when they look at a statue of a Confederate leader, that it serves as a reminder of what happened to their ancestors against their will in this country. And while it may be painful, I think having a reminder stand is not a bad idea. Now, you also get to where people get into, geez, are you kidding me? Did you see the letter from the commissioner of the Southeastern Athletic Conference to the state of Mississippi?
Yes.
Saying that we won't hold any SEC championship games here, or
lose that flag, baby.
If you don't change your state flag. Well, somebody tell me. Those of you who are listening and watching, tell me, when was the last time there was a major SEC championship game that was scheduled to be in the state of Mississippi? The answer is never, I believe. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but don't you see what this guy's doing? As you see, as you put it, he saw a parade forming and he ran to get in front of it, and he's got nothing to lose here.
Yeah,
nothing to lose because they're not planning. They don't have the capacity at either of the 2 SEC stadiums, okay, to hold the types of crowds they would have for a championship event. They're never going to have one of those. It's always going to be in Atlanta.
Yeah. But he looks like a big woke hero by sending the letter.
Well, and you know what that makes him?
A fraud.
An asshole is what that makes him. But you know what? There are going to be people.
Byron says the more shocking thing for me is that Mississippi has universities.
Yeah.
Ha ha ha.
But what bothers me is that it's just like, the NAACP in Atlanta saying, not the first time a black man's been shot for sleeping.
Sleeping?
Well, this is the case of the guy who was shot by the police officer.
Yeah, Rayshard Brooks. He wasn't. He was passed out behind the wheel of a car.
But he wasn't shot there. He was shot after 45 minutes when he was resisting and running.
Yep.
But this guy with the SEC commissioner, there are going to be some black people that embrace him as, he's trying to help our cause, knowing that it's an entire, complete fraud. There's not going to be an SEC championship game in the state of Mississippi ever. Ever.
No, it's not like, home team advantage, or anything like. Well, we're gonna have it in Oxford.
But I love these people that make these pronouncements that have absolutely nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to con you. These are not anti-racist friends of yours. In fact, I would argue that he probably is something of a closet racist to throw this out as bait in front of you and see if you snap at it.
Okay, are you reading comments? I think Ashley's going to have to win the internet today. Mississippi, the diabetic toe that should have fallen off a long time ago. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. You're so wicked.
Oh, well, I mean,
And of course, Jane is up there listening to us. Where's she close to? Mississippi.
you know, Mississippi is, well, it's Mississippi.
Yep.
You know, and I think this guy, you know, from the Southeastern Conference, the president of the SEC and all that, is throwing a shiny little lure out in the bass pond to see what bites. Mm-hmm. And you know,
Well,
Mississippi has its problems.
I think it's been less than 2 years since Mississippi successfully defended keeping their state flag the way it is. But I don't know, have they ever put that to a popular vote? Have they ever let the people of Mississippi decide, do we want to keep our state flag or change it?
Probably not.
You know, and of course, when you got a bunch of, you got a bunch of goobers in the legislature that are, defenders of the old South. I don't know, man. We're getting all bogged down in symbols and names, when the important thing is, we got cops that are, whether because they're incompetent or whether they're just the wrong kind of person that is a police officer, they're killing people, and it's, we hear people say a disproportionate amount of black people. When you look at FBI statistics, you find out that on a yearly basis, far more whites than blacks are killed by police. Mm-hmm. So, in my opinion, this is not a black-white problem. I think a lot of black people are going to disagree with me there, but this is not a black-white problem. This is a problem with people who should never be given a gun and a badge, being given a gun and a badge. It's policy.
And also, I do think it is disproportionate deaths when they're in custody. And I think people don't often include that phrase, and I think it's very important. George Floyd was in custody. Okay?
Yep.
You've had people that are in custody that suddenly, when they're waiting to be booked into jail, they get all kinds of injuries that cause their deaths. This is, I think, the big problem. And again, it's not widespread, but it's enough that we ought to take some strong action to stop however it is, how many it is the in custody. You got more white people than you have black people in this country. Mm-hmm. You have more white people then that have access to guns.
So that's always going to be the case, is that there's, most of the time it's going to be more whites than blacks.
It should be the case.
Yeah.
It should be the case. But I think if you look at the percentage of black males that are killed in custody, and again, when you're cuffed and you're on the ground, you're in custody, okay? I don't want to parse words on that with anybody. I think that's where your real problem is. We need to take our break here. You haven't had coffee yet, have you?
No, but I had a healthy Muggo Joe before leaving the house.
Well, we're going to get more coffee, and if you will stick around, we'll be right back on The Morning Exiles.
Just talk amongst yourselves.
Talk amongst yourselves. It's coffee talk.
We'll be right back. Stay by.